Hey, everybody. Mark and I have over 20 years of experience as therapists and as addicts in long-term successful recovery. We know better than anyone what works and what doesn't to break out of porn and sex addiction, heal betrayal trauma, and reclaim your relationship.
And we've poured all of our personal and professional recovery and healing experience into a first-of-its-kind program for addicts, spouses, and couples. We call it Dare to Connect.
At least 4 times every week, we engage with you in real time, in the trenches, giving you the knowledge and the tools to take back your life and relationship.
Whatever else you've done on your journey for healing and recovery, you've never done anything like this.
Mark and I, we've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. Don't reinvent the wheel.
We all know tomorrow never comes. Look, don't wait one more day to change. Claim your free 2-week trial today at daretoconnectnow.com.
Hey, everybody. I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSE Squared podcast. Welcome, everybody, to episode 244 of the PBSE podcast. It's Steve and Mark coming at you with a unique episode today.
Yeah.
It's an interesting submission, and I guess, well, before I talk about it, because I want to talk about it, I better just read it. In this case, we're going to read it. We don't always do that, but the context here is going to be helpful because we're going to be kind of all over the board in our thoughts with this, with some really encouraging thoughts and some really we need to make change thoughts. So here we go.
Yeah.
And the title, as you can see, is it my responsibility to make my porn-addicted partner feel comfortable so he will consistently tell me the truth? If that title weren't, it's almost gaslighting. It's so obvious, but we will explain as we go into this.
We will.
So this comes from a partner. She says, firstly, I just want to deeply thank and admire you both for the help you've given to my partner and I. This podcast means a great deal to the both of us, and I am always so excited to drive to work on Tuesday so I can hear the latest and greatest from you both. It's very kind. We appreciate the kind words.
Thank you.
So I will get right to it. As a partner of an addict, what can I do to help my partner, so my addict partner, feel more supported during his recovery so that he may feel more comfortable telling me the truth? Time and time again, I have caught him in lies or omissions, and it's eating away at the trust in our relationship. Most recently, we engaged in physical intimacy, and I could tell immediately that he had been looking at porn that day. I can't explain it. I just knew. And many partners I know can connect with that.
Oh, yeah.
I felt used, like my body was simply a means to an end for him, like a masturbation device. Also not very far off the mark if that is the case. So I asked my partner if he'd been hiding anything from me, and he came clean that he did in fact have some slips over the weekend. I have since made it clear, respectfully, that I do not wish to engage in intercourse while information about his sexual activities is being withheld from me. The main issue here is that during previous conversations, he has agreed to proactively come to me when these slips happen so that I don't have to play detective anymore. But he has never followed through with that agreement, and he continues to wait around until I ask the perfect question. That is a line that my wife used almost word for word once upon a time.
Oh, yeah, mine too.
After this incident, my partner told me that he doesn't feel like he can come to me because I get really quiet when he talks about his slips, and therefore I do not make him feel supported enough. You can probably tell Mark and I are having a hard time getting through this, but we will press on. If you have any suggestions or words of wisdom to share, I would greatly appreciate it so much.
Oh boy, when we read that part, we said, "Oh boy, do we!"
This is one of those podcasts where we really had to work hard to not make it 2 hours and not make it too intense. So, well, we're excited to tackle this today.
We are, and the first thing we want to just both applaud and just express our deepest respect, admiration. This partner, this betrayed partner, she is amazing.
Yeah,
I mean, the patience, the willingness, quite frankly, the huge resilience she's showing. Her submission was very articulate, very well thought out, very reasonable and balanced. She just did a great job. I mean, I'm just so impressed with her whole approach to this, with really, really crazy hard stuff. So to you, partner, thank you. We just couldn't give you more accolades for how you're coming at this. And at the
No,
same time, when I read this in my old addict self, I would have been like, my shame sirens would have been going off like an air raid siren, because I can relate to this guy and why he is taking this position in his relationship. I used to take the same exact position, right? Whenever I would be in an uncomfortable situation, whenever I was confronted with poor behaviors on my part, whenever I was confronted about commitments I wasn't honoring, whenever I wasn't following through or being consistent, whenever I was uncomfortable or quote, the bright light was shined on me to be account able, to be response able, to own my stuff, I would quite most of the time shift into this deflect, place the blame outside of me, put the responsibility on someone else. You are supposed to make me feel a certain way so I can do the following. I was notorious for that approach in my addiction and in my early to mid recovery, frankly. So I really, really relate to this guy.
yeah. Well, and the obvious question here is what would be the healthy approach, right? To
Yeah.
do where do we go from here? Where do we take this? So we're gonna break this down into a for her section and a for him section. We thought that would probably be the best way to do this. For her, meaning the partner. We recognize that some addicts are female who listen to this, but for the most part, generally speaking, we're speaking to more of a female audience when we're talking to partners. So let's just start off with that, because there are things, in all fairness, that a partner can and ought to be doing to set the stage for healthy dialogue and communication.
Yeah. True.
It isn't to say that there isn't anything that can be done. And so we're just going to go through this, not knowing this coupleship, just like we don't know anyone else who's listening, to kind of cover the bases on both sides of, what are some of the basics and how to approach this, and what ducks need to be in a row, right, in order to tackle this.
And as we do, please, we know that these are hard topics to tackle, especially and legitimately for betrayed partners. As you hear what we're going to say, we're not saying that you are doing something or not doing something. We just want to lay out all the things that are possible from a betrayed partner's, side of the street. What does that look like? And so you'll have some discomfort with what you hear. It's not to excuse or placate or anything with his addiction side of the street. These are just options.
Well, it's just to ensure that you are, because we do work with partners where, and understandably so, their trauma, what they bring to the table, deficits in how they communicate, can exacerbate a situation like this. It doesn't mean they're responsible, but it does make it more difficult. And so we're just going to kind of walk through that piece of that. Okay. So first up, it really is important for partners, and we know that this may sound obvious to some, but for others, this is extremely difficult because of that survival place many of you find yourselves in. But there does need to be a taking of the time and the effort, even with a therapist, if possible or needed, to truly figure out, what are my real feelings, my needs, and my wants, and how do those all tie in with each other? In other words, what is my authentic self post betrayal? That's a tall order, because for many, as many of you know, the betrayal trauma that occurs with this process does in many ways rob us of that feeling of the authentic self and who am I and what do I want and need and all of those things. So we know that there is a reeling process to that, but as much as you are able to utilize whatever tools that you can to figure out what those feelings, wants, and needs are, and then come up with boundaries and attach consequences that resonate or are the way that you put those into action with other people, right? They're the way in which we express those inner wants and needs with the world, including with our partners, or with your partners, rather.
Yeah, and we've talked about this in other podcasts. Always keep in mind, boundaries are never intended to control or change another person. They are only intended to protect your authentic wants and needs, what it is to live true to you. and these boundaries you put boundaries in place to protect that. And when someone violates what is authentic to your wants and needs in life, you then have consequences, outcomes, results of the fact that they do that continue to do what? Keep your wants and needs and authentic life as safe as possible, as intact as possible.
Yeah. Well, and actually there's a great example from the submission itself that I'll just throw in here for 2 seconds while we talk about this, because she said, let's see here. Earlier in her submission, she said she was talking about a boundary, right? And she said, I have since made it clear, since this last time where he had slipped before sharing it with me before we were intimate. I have since made it clear, respectfully, that I do not wish to engage in intercourse while information about his sexual proclivities is being withheld from me. Now, if that is an authentic boundary for you in terms of I wish, what that communicates to my addict brain is a preference or an opening, right?
Oh, it would be nice.
It would be nice. Now, maybe, and as a partner, I could also see how a partner might say that in a really nice way. And maybe it's just a turn of phrase that you're using in your submission. But respectfully, I mean, I would say that most partners would edge more towards the place of, I will not engage with you sexually without knowing who I'm engaging sexually with. It is not fair for you to take me to bed not knowing who you are.
Absolutely.
And that is absolutely critical. So if that isn't happening, neither is intercourse, neither is intimacy. And that's not a punishment. That is because you robbed me of my opportunity to be authentic with you when I don't know who you are in that moment. I can't really, guys, I'm going to edge towards some triggering wording here, but really it robs a partner to a degree of their ability to consent to sexual activity when you really look at it, because they don't know what they're consenting to.
Yeah, and so, how often in our culture, in all sorts of areas, think of all the areas in our culture, whatever country we live in, whatever circumstances, informed consent is a big deal.
It's a huge deal.
Kinds of things in our lives. And how angry do we become when we were required to give consent when we weren't fully informed? Right? That's a big
yes
in the world.
You ever bought a car that the dealership swore up and down there was going to be fine, and then you get home and 3 weeks later you got to replace the transmission?
Mm-hmm.
Well, take that feeling for any addict who's listening to this and multiply it infinitely tied to one's own sexual fidelity, intimacy, and connection with their partner, and maybe you can start to grasp what that means to a partner of an addict.
Yes.
It's a big deal.
Yes.
So anyway,
I love
just
that.
a thought.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the first piece. Second piece, right, for partners, it is important that once you've established these boundaries and consequences for each, right, that you figure out, how can I vulnerably share these with him in whatever way is safest, right? And the emphasis on that last piece is critical, because we know we work with guys in, for example, our Dare to Connect program every day, who thankfully they're in the program, so they have us as backup to be able to teach them these kinds of skills. But we know that for many guys, they lack the skill sets to be able to even hear these things in a semi-healthy way. I mean, I'll throw myself into the mix. Pre-recovery, my wife couldn't even get needs out before I became reactive. The minute I even hinted of them on the wind, I'd already shut down. Like my inner vulnerability had already packed a bag, gotten in the car, and was like halfway to Vegas before my wife even started into
I was
her needs.
I was the same way, because if my wife, when she started to find her voice and to speak her truth and to stand her ground, if she would state a want or a need that was absolutely essential for her, how did my addict brain immediately interpret that? That I was screwing up because I wasn't doing that. I was doing something wrong. Here she is getting on my back again. So yeah, you're just like you, Steve. She couldn't do it that way. Sometimes you may find, if you're a betrayed partner trying to be in healing, you may need to put all this stuff in writing and send it to your partner, and it's not eyeball to eyeball at all.
To be candid with you, I think that that's actually a great thing that every partner should do, it, especially in the early stages, because one, especially if you're dealing with, and we're not saying that this partner is, but if you're dealing with a partner who has manipulative tendencies, writing doesn't change. And he said, she said, woulda, coulda, shoulda is a manipulator's playground, just being honest with you. Right. When boundaries are communicated in a clear, galvanized, written fashion, there is no debate. There is no discussion about, well, you didn't actually say that. No, this is what it is.
And if I
And you may, depending on the level, where you guys are at as a coupleship, like Mark said, that could be in writing that you send to him. In many cases, that is something that is done in a therapist's office with somebody there to mediate and keep the discussion on track and keep it from
yes,
derailing.
yes, yep,
Right.
great points. Yep.
So,
And if it's given to the addict partner in writing, or it's in the therapist office, then he has the opportunity to do his work, his side of the street, with regard to getting himself into a place to really hear that, I like to use the word receive. Is he in a receiving place? Right. And we'll talk more about his side of the street in a minute.
yep, absolutely. We're getting close to the end of the list here, but in next would be ensure that you are also practicing healthy communication skills. And again, we lovingly connect with, and we do this all the time in D2C. We work with partners all the time to help them to recognize that even though they didn't cause these issues through a betrayal trauma lens and through a reactivity lens can sometimes bring up expression of feelings that don't end up fronting the goals that they're trying to achieve. Right. I could give myriads of examples. We won't do that for sake of time, but when that anger, that betrayal comes up, it obviously can take on a mind of its own if you're not careful. So making sure that those things are channeled or communicated in an appropriate way is important. So for example, when you're feeling anger or anger related feelings, anger, we teach and dare to connect all the time. Anger is always a secondary emotion. It is a standalone emotion in that it's a valid emotion, but it is always caused by other feelings underneath. So, for example, I'm angry because I've been lied to. I'm angry because I'm feeling disrespected. I'm angry because I wasn't supported. Right? I mean, there's the list just goes on and on. So when we express anger with a partner, which is again totally fine, we are all about that. Express it, accurately and fully. It is important to be expressing that in a way that also communicates the vulnerable primary emotions behind the anger.
Yeah. What's under the anger, right? If I
Yeah.
peel back the layers, what is really hurting me here? Right. We talk about anger as being a surface emotion, or an umbrella emotion, but it's very important to get through those layers to see what is this really about, and can I express that vulnerably? Yeah. When my wife started to do that, when it wasn't just anger, but she started to get to the underneath feelings, that's where she started to really reach my heart.
Yep.
Like you've said, Steve, you would have much rather that Brittany was just angry than if she was sad, or she was broken, or felt unheard, or felt dismissed, or felt all of
Yes.
those deeper emotions. When our partners express those, it really puts us in a place that we can't just dismiss her because she's angry.
Yeah, I mean, we hear this from that assertion from addicts all the time, and we don't tell partners that in a way of, "Hey, this is the way to really stick it to him." That's
No.
that's not what it is. But frankly, you will much more poignantly communicate your pain by expressing in a vulnerable way. Because, like Mark said, as long as I could keep Brittany pissed, I could stay pissed too, and we could just stay pissed. Because then I didn't have to look at all the other things I was feeling. I could just be angry,
Well,
right?
one of the things that she brings up when he starts to express this, what is her surface level knee jerk understandable reaction? She goes quiet.
Mhm.
And her going quiet, he then claims that triggers him, so he feels unsafe. Well, part of her healthy communication, going quiet's fine, but then can she get to the place where she can kind of peel back that quietness and get to what's under it, and then express it vulnerably and openly to him?
Yep, absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. Next up on the list, there's two more to go before we take a dramatic shift in gears here. Avoid toxicity in your dialogue, right? So that's important. Any name calling, sarcasm, mind reading, which is very common all for partners to get pulled into because of, again, the trust issues and the frustration and everything, are all very understandable, but they, again, do detract and pull away from trying to get where partners want to go in conversations like this rather than taking them where they want to go.
Well,
And then the last, oh yeah, go
one
ahead, Mark.
thing, Steve, is when we, and it's very understandable, we'll go to these very reactive surface emotions. One of the things that betrayed partners have said a lot to you, and both you and me, Steve, is I hate getting into these dialogues with my addict partner where I feel like I've abandoned my authentic self. I'm not a raging lunatic. I'm actually a kind, loving, patient person nearly all the time until we have these situations.
Great
I
point.
don't like not being me.
Yeah.
That's why this healthy communication is so important for partners, to stay in your higher, truer self that you know is you.
So glad you mentioned that. Yeah. Too often partners, they engage without even realizing it in what we call self-betrayal,
Yeah.
right? As a result of these other things, we find ourselves our partners find themselves compromising their authentic self in all sorts of different ways. And we definitely want to avoid that at all
Well,
costs.
and legitimately partners say, well, that's the only way to get his attention. He only listens when I go to that crazy place.
Mm.
And what Steve, you and I would say is that sounds like, yes, a matter of authentic communication, but also a great lack of boundaries. If you feel that's the only way to get through to him is by abandoning your authentic self, boundaries need to come into the situation now.
Well, and the other thing to keep in mind, guys, and do bear in mind, we're not just saying this as therapists. Like this isn't just a nice thing you read in a book. We know this from practice experience, especially me. I dare say I was much more the reactive of us two in our addiction when it came to bursts of anger and rage and all that kind of stuff. I'll own that.
Yeah.
Uh, you rarely do you ever elicit any sort of change from dialogue like that. And even when you do, it is compliance based, not conversion based. And that's the problem. It results in short term change based on a big enough gun barrel being hefted at someone and not actual change in the coupleship, which is what we're looking for and needs to happen.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, Mark, you want to cover these? You want to
Yeah.
jump into these next two?
The
Or do you want
last
me to do
two,
them?
and boy, did these just shout out at you and me when she
This
said,
is where we shift.
oh my gosh, because he said that her going quiet doesn't make him feel comfortable. And the first thing we have to absolutely just put out on the table is you can't make anyone feel anything. And
And
we
you most definitely can't make anyone do anything in response to
right.
feelings.
And
Right.
we've had people say, well, what do you mean you can't make anyone feel anything? When I'm with this person, I feel these things, and it's because of them. We need to understand that there's a difference between an initial feeling of something, which is normal, to just
Yes.
before you're conscious of it, you just react to various triggers or words or tones of voice or whatever. But immediately after that initial reaction, we are in the driver's seat as to what we do next. How do I interpret this feeling? What does it mean to me? Do I just continue in this reactive space and do nothing to intervene or interrupt it?
Yeah.
Right? We have full agency and in the driver's seat about that. And so you can't make me, maybe a better way to say, you can't make me stay in this feeling. That's my choice.
And you absolutely cannot make me respond in any way at all.
No.
That is 100% within my purview, right? And that is a deviation that we have to correct with partners and addicts all the time. Now, this is about the point in time where addicts are going to be pissed off at us in this podcast, and partners are probably going to be saying, "Gosh, that's scary," but that resonates. Well, we hope that you'll pay attention to that. And for the addicts that are being pissed, we hope that you'll still continue to listen because sometimes the hard things to hear are the true things. I would have been pissed at a certain stage too.
No, without
But
question.
but the closing piece for the her segment of this is you need to let him own his side of the street, and after beyond the things that we just talked about, unless there's something we're forgetting, you surrender the difference using 12-step skill sets. The rest of it is on him.
Yeah.
That's his job.
Yep.
And so now with love, we're going to shift to the him side.
Yeah.
Okay.
What is the him side?
So we are not here to tell anyone addict specifically we can't speak to anyone addict's story. Mark and I's stories are varied. We can speak with empathy through the lens that we know that really difficult things and circumstances, environments, and occurrences have probably brought you to the point of listening to this podcast, considering coming into our Dare to Connect program, free 2-week trial. We'd love to have you join us, daretoconnectnow.com, or doing any of the other things that you're doing right now in the process. However, empathy will never, ever rob accountability. At the end of the day, whatever circumstances or environments brought you, me, Mark, any addict to the table here, we are in control of what we do next, right? And we would say that the following attributes are things that any addict, wherever he may have found himself previously, if he is sincere in the recovery process, he will be making progressive efforts to do the following. We are addicts in long-term recovery, which among other things has qualified us as master bullshitters. So we know what it means to make excuses. We know what it means to hide behind paradigms. We know what it means to play the victim because it's the easier, softer way, as 12 step would teach.
And there's legitimate crazy stuff behind that. I mean, for me,
Absolutely.
why did I not tell the truth? Because my shame was immense. If I let somebody see the whole of me, the good, the bad, and the ugly back then, I was convinced that my life was over. Reputation ruined. No one would ever see me or think about me the same ever again. And so we understand that shame and fear are big driving factors. The other part is I didn't know how to be account able or response able. They weren't skill sets that I possessed because I'd spent my life avoiding and escaping those hard things, owning and facing my stuff.
In
So
fact, yeah, well, I was just going to say, in fact, if this is something you resonate with, guys, or you see yourself struggling with, I'm just going to tell you right now, get your butt into Dare to Connect, not tomorrow. Get it in there right now. Just today in our addict session, we just had a great, amazing session. We're wrapping up the subject of triggers. It's a month long or 5 week long segment. We've got 2 more weeks to go. And we just wrapped up a discussion with the addicts about self care and the attributes of components of self care. And some of what we're sharing right now is just kind of the tip of the iceberg of 8 pieces to that whole pie. But we hope that that's something, if you resonate with that, get your butt in there at daretoconnectnow.com so you can take part in those discussions and pull the recordings from it because frankly, today's session was amazing, as was the participation
it
of our
was,
guys. It was a
it
great
was.
session.
Because we're going to tell you a baseline for this relationship and any relationship that's struggling with these things. And this baseline scared the living daylights out of me. It's called being willing and open and practicing telling the truth at all costs. And I could hear myself years ago. Wait. Are you saying all costs? I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to be transparent. I'm going to put it all on the table with my partner at all costs. You don't really mean that, do you? But we do.
Yeah, we
Right?
absolutely do. And
Because
we know that's uncomfortable and it's
it's
scary for
crazy uncomfortable.
a whole myriad of reasons, guys. But when Mark says baseline, and I'll own it, I'm the one who put that into the production piece. At a baseline, that is the baseline. If you are serious about this process and you truly and you vocalize a love for your partner, I don't care what culture, creed, background you come from, whatever that may encompass, if we as people, not even as addicts, if we as people are not willing to share our full self, the good, the bad, the ugly with our partner, the way we love that person needs serious work. That's the reality here.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
need to change. We
Well,
need to.
because in the early days of my relationship, I was convinced that if I let her see all of me, she wouldn't choose me. So I tried to control
Yes.
if she would choose me or not. I controlled that heavily by what I let her see and what I kept hidden. I drug my addiction into our relationship and she had no idea, different from the way Steve was. My wife didn't know. And why didn't I let her know? Because I thought if she knows, she won't choose me. She won't agree to marry me. I got to control this. And so we get how scary this is, right? So we talk about this honesty at all costs. This particular submission was what happens when he has a relapse.
Mm. Yes.
And there's basic components, guys. When we have a relapse, first of all, we do our individual work to be able to come to our partners within 24 hours maximum of that relapse. And we don't rely on our partner to set the stage or make us feel comfortable, or she didn't quite have the sweetness in her face that made me feel like I could disclose. We need to go plug into our outside support system to figure out why we relapsed, what led up to it. And then we need to talk about our mindfulness about identifying all of that. We need to look at what broke down on my end. Why did I get myself into that place again? And what specific changes am I going to begin to immediately implement so that the outcome next time has a high probability of being different?
Yeah.
That is what I'm going to share with my partner, not just what the relapse was, but why it was and what I'm going to do different going forward. We always share all of that with regard to reporting a relapse to a partner.
Absolutely. Well, and this next piece is kind of almost a bigger piece of a pie, right? We're kind of call this next piece is, guys, again, if we are in sincere recovery, we will also, in addition to the above, what we just stated, we will be willing to progressively learn how to sit in uncomfortable places.
Oh, God, I used to hate that phrase. Because why was I an addict? To get away from all the uncomfortable places, Steve?
Exactly. We're pain
crazy?
averse. We have most of us addicts, literally, at least in some areas of our lives, have been on the mouse wheel of escape for so long we forgot we were even running. It's just become background noise.
Mm-hmm.
And part of this process, again, and it is a journey, and nobody does it perfect to begin with, but we have to be willing to develop out the skill sets, and part of that is just practicing it. There are other things too, but to be able to sit in uncomfortable spaces and be able to ask ourselves the following questions. Why am I responding this way? When my partner asks me if I'm sober and I throw a belt at the wall so hard that the little prong from the belt stabs into the wall like a spear, which is something Steve did for real, by the way. Why? Why am I responding that way? Is that really a Brittany problem? Or is that a Steve problem?
In my case, if my wife's asking me those hard questions, why do I go completely stoic, silent, and turn into a wall of granite? Why do I do that?
Yes.
What is not, well, she didn't say it right. She didn't come at it properly. She didn't set the stage properly. That's not what this is about.
It's an internal response that I am having.
Yes. And where is
I have to figure that out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, I'm talking over Mark a ton today.
No,
Mark, you go ahead.
We're doing great.
We're both just so passionate about this topic. It's hard to like.
You can tell. We could
ourselves.
We could go another 2 hours on this topic. Yeah.
Yeah.
We talk about, you notice we hyphenate these words. Where can I account for why I'm reacting these ways? Where am I accountable? What about my response? What is my ability to not react to my partner doing these things, but my ability to respond, hit the pause button, collect myself, and truly come at this authentically and be response able instead of reactive. These are all things that we invite this guy here that's being that we're referencing here for him to work on these things, all of us. In what ways am I growing in my capacities to practice owning uncomfortable things, being in uncomfortable dialogues, right? Sitting in things that I used to run away from and medicate and avoid and escape from. How do I start leaning in and leading out with my side of the street instead of pointing the finger at my partner?
Absolutely. Well, guys, there's so much more we could say about this, but there is just one thing that I will end, and I kind of started the addict segment with this. As addicts, guys, one addict to another, for anyone who's listening, we caused this. Okay. There are things that played a role in getting us here, and we hold empathy for that all day. But when it comes to your partner's betrayal, she didn't cause it. The neighbor didn't cause it. Family, you caused it. We caused it. Now, we cannot fix our partners. And we talk about that all the time. Trauma is a one-way street. And we may not even be responsible for the circumstances that got us here in totality, but we always are, and we are always going to be responsible for how we handle the situations today, how we show up for those partners in their healing or lack thereof, and how we address those issues as they come up a day at a time.
Yeah.
We are the only ones that can change or fix that. If you are waiting to disclose uncomfortable information until the right time, it will never come. There's never a good time to hurt a partner. But the reality, we talked about this once on the podcast once before. When we act out, it does show up in other ways, guys. Like this partner stated, she could tell.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
When we act out, to use a visceral example we used once upon a time, we've already stuck the knife in. The only difference is we haven't done the courtesy of telling our partner that it's there and haven't begun the process of trying to remove it and fix the damage.
Right.
We lie to ourselves when we convince ourselves of something otherwise.
Yeah. And you'll in our Dare to Connect program, we talk a lot about our culture of empowerment.
Yes.
And we've talked a lot about this betrayed partner stepping into her power with the things we've talked about for her side. But I want to invite all of you addicts listening. I'm inviting you to step into your power. Step
Absolutely.
into your powerful, courageous, transparent, vulnerable space. Take back your power, guys, and step out of that disempowered addiction place and into your empowered place. Your higher self, your better self, your true self. We have great confidence in your ability to do that progressively, a little bit at a time. And that's our invitation.
If us couple of wingnuts can do it, we guarantee all you awesome, amazing men can do it.
That's absolutely true.
Absolutely is doable. Guys, we love you. Partners, we love you. We appreciate all of you. If you're not in there now, damn it, get your buttons and Dare to Connect. I'm just going to say it. We want to see you over there. Come give it a try. Give it a couple of weeks. See what you think. Is it for everybody? Probably not. Is it for most of you? Probably. And we guarantee we can take you to a better place in your recovery from wherever you're at. DareToConnectNow.com is where you can find that. And as always, if you would like to send in submissions to the podcast and have those things addressed in a somewhat belated fashion, we do have quite a backlog right now of submissions, but we will eventually circle around to them. You can send those in at the contact form at the bottom of the website, PBSEpodcast.com. You can get those questions to us, and we'll get working on those.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for being with us here today, everybody. We appreciate you. We will pick things back up in our next episode.
Sounds great. Here, guys. Everything expressed on the PBSE podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.